If you walked into a house and nothing looked wrong, no broken windows, no overturned furniture, no signs of panic, would you assume everything was fine? That was the first illusion in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Because sometimes the most terrifying clue is not chaos. It's silence. Only hours after Nancy was last seen safe inside her home, federal investigators would step across that same quiet threshold and feel something they could not immediately explain. Nothing dramatic greeted them. No shattered glass. No forced entry. No desperate message scribbled in haste. Just a stillness that didn't belong there. And when seasoned agents grow quiet, when briefings slow down, when updates fade instead of intensify, it usually means one thing. They've seen something that changes everything. So, what did investigators discover inside Nancy Guthrie's home that made them return and then stop talking altogether? To understand that shift, we have to go back to the beginning, to the night that seemed perfectly ordinary. Nancy's final evening unfolded with the kind of calm that people remember fondly. Dinner was shared. Conversation flowed easily. Laughter filled the rooms. There were no raised voices, no tension lingering beneath polite smiles. The atmosphere was warm, comfortable, predictable. It was the kind of night you never imagined becoming significant. She returned home just before 10 p.m., according to law enforcement. That detail was confirmed. One detail, however, was not: the identity of the driver who brought her home. In most missing person cases, such information is quickly clarified. Yet here, it wasn't publicly emphasized. That absence stood out. Investigators rarely withhold something trivial. When Nancy stepped inside her home that night, nothing seemed disturbed. She did not call anyone in distress. Neighbors reported no unusual sounds, no arguments, no doors slamming, no alarms. The house settled into darkness as it always did. And by morning, Nancy was gone. When investigators entered the home, they expected clues. Broken locks, forced windows, signs of resistance. There were none. Every door appeared intact, every window unbroken. Furniture sat exactly where it should. No signs of struggle marked the floors or walls. In most disappearances, damage tells a story. Something, anything, disrupts the environment. But here, the house felt preserved. Too preserved. It was as if the night had folded neatly into morning without interruption. And that's what unsettled them most. Because when a person vanishes from their own home without a single outward disturbance, investigators begin to consider possibilities that are far more complex than random intrusion. It suggests timing. It suggests familiarity. It suggests that fear may not have entered the room at all. Was she taken by someone she trusted? Did she leave willingly? Or had something been orchestrated so carefully that the house itself became part of the illusion? Initially, the case was treated as a standard missing persons report. But that classification did not last long. The FBI entered quickly, and when federal authorities move in early, it signals that something about the case extends beyond routine. Federal involvement doesn't happen without reason. The FBI does not intervene in every disappearance. Their presence often suggests cross-state communication, digital complexity, organized behavior, or patterns that demand broader resources. In Nancy's case, agents arrived quietly but decisively. They didn't just glance around. They processed the home methodically. Items were cataloged. Measurements were taken. Patterns were observed. Then something unusual happened. After the home was initially cleared, investigators returned. Revisiting a residence isn't standard procedure unless something changes. Either new information surfaces or an earlier detail begins to carry new meaning. A second look means a second theory, and second theories only develop when the first one doesn't fully fit. The timeline bothered them. Nancy had been seen safe late at night. By morning, she was missing. That narrow window of time suggested precision. Either someone knew exactly when to act, or Nancy herself moved during a period when no one would question it. Both possibilities raised concerns. And then came communication. When ransom-related messaging entered the picture, federal jurisdiction strengthened. Any demand crossing digital platforms or state lines shifts the investigation into a different category entirely. The tone of public updates changed after that. Details slowed, information narrowed, then gradually silence replaced commentary. Silence in an investigation is rarely accidental. It is strategic. When authorities reduce public statements, it often means they are verifying something sensitive. Every word release carries risk. Every detail can tip off someone watching closely. If communication suggests progress, it can alter behavior. If it contradicts a hidden truth, it can trigger panic. So investigators choose their quiet moments carefully. In Nancy's case, that quiet became louder than any press conference. Behind the scenes, agents were reconstructing ordinary life. They examined more than doors and windows. They studied routine. They asked, did this look like someone who planned to leave? Shoes near the door. A phone charging. Medication untouched. Personal items left behind. These are subtle details, but they matter. A person who leaves voluntarily often takes essentials. A person interrupted does not. Digital evidence became critical. Phones tell stories without speaking. Timestamps don't guess. They record. When was the device last unlocked? Were messages read? Did location tracking suddenly stop? Did internet routers log unusual activity? Smart home systems. Even when underestimated, document entry points, device connections, environmental shifts. Investigators don't rely on memory. They rely on logs. And logs don't lie. If a device goes silent at a precise moment, that silence becomes a timestamp. If it continues moving, that movement reshapes the theory. The FBI doesn't revisit homes for drama. They return when patterns demand confirmation, which is exactly what happened here. When agents came back, there were no flashing lights, no dramatic declarations, no hazmat suits or aggressive forensic displays. That absence was telling. It meant they weren't reacting to a sudden, violent discovery. They were confirming a developing idea. Return visits often involve precision, remeasuring spaces, rephotographing angles, collecting items previously deemed minor but now significant. Because sometimes evidence doesn't reveal itself until connected to something else. A house is more than walls and furniture. It contains behavior patterns, habits, predictability. If something disrupts that pattern, even subtly, it leaves a fingerprint. Investigators examine whether space feels lived in or staged. A room that appears too perfect can raise suspicion. Disorder can be authentic, but perfection can be curated. They ask themselves, was the scene natural or arranged? That distinction changes everything. Then, another late-night visit. Law enforcement arrived at a relative's residence. They stayed for hours. No public explanation followed. To outsiders, that may look alarming. To investigators, it's often about clarification. Follow-up visits happen when timelines need tightening, when statements require rechecking, when digital evidence overlaps with physical location. Late-night timing doesn't necessarily signal drama. It signals urgency. If answers are needed immediately, investigators act immediately. The absence of specialized forensic teams during that visit suggested something else. This was likely about verification, not discovery of new biological evidence. Photographs might have been taken, layouts reviewed, statements compared. In investigations like this, precision matters more than spectacle. The focus had shifted. No longer was the case just about finding Nancy. It was about understanding whether her disappearance aligned with the narrative being presented. Not every ransom demand originates from an abduction. Sometimes demands follow events rather than cause them. Investigators analyze tone, structure, timing. Are messages controlled and deliberate, or rushed and reactive? Do deadlines appear strategic or theatrical? Communication patterns reveal personality traits, control or lack of it. If a deadline passes and communication continues, it tells investigators something. If silence follows a deadline, that silence also speaks. Financial transactions leave trails, even digital ones. The FBI's objective extends beyond recovery. It includes accountability, motive, prevention, which brings us back to the house. Because whatever shifted the case forward began there. Not with chaos, not with a struggle, but with something subtle enough to require a second look. Something that didn't fit the first explanation. Homes carry rhythms. Lights turn off at predictable hours. Devices connect automatically. Doors close the same way every night. When one of those rhythms breaks, even slightly, it leaves a trace. Investigators don't just search for what happened. They search for what should have happened, but didn't. Was there a door that normally triggered a sensor but didn't that night? Did a device disconnect briefly and reconnect? Did activity patterns shift before Nancy was reported missing? Tiny inconsistencies grow louder when layered together. Individually, they seem harmless. Collectively, they tell a story, and that story may have contradicted the initial assumptions. Which would explain the silence? Which would explain the return? Which would explain why public updates slowed just as the investigation sharpened? In complex investigations, there is a moment when focus narrows. Early stages are wide and exploratory. Many possibilities exist, but eventually one theory begins to outweigh the others. When that happens, communication decreases, not because nothing is happening, but because something very specific is happening. Nancy's case appeared to reach that point. The questions shifted from where is she to what truly happened inside that home. And perhaps more importantly, when did it begin? Was the disappearance spontaneous? Or had decisions been made long before anyone realized something was wrong? Investigators rarely reveal that pivot publicly, but you can sense it. It's in the tone of statements, the reduction of details, the quiet confidence behind closed doors. Nancy's absence became its own presence. An empty chair at breakfast, a quiet hallway in the morning light. But investigators weren't guided by emotion alone. They were guided by pattern, and somewhere within those patterns, something didn't align. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was subtle, which makes it far more powerful. Because loud evidence can be defended, quiet evidence cannot. When the FBI stops speaking, it's rarely because they lack direction. It's often because they've found one. And when a house that appears perfectly calm draws federal attention twice, it's not the chaos that matters. It's the calm that hides timing, the calm that suggests familiarity, the calm that refuses to explain itself. What exactly did they uncover inside Nancy Guthrie's home? The public may not yet know every detail, but one thing is clear. The stillness was not empty. It was speaking, and investigators were